ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Talking Cardboard. Today we have a special treat. We're going to be reviewing a relatively new game in Root. As always, I'm joined by the regular crew, Kaylor, Corey, myself, Brian, and John. And without further ado, Corey's going to do his best attempt at giving a bit of an insight into this game.
Okay everybody, so here is a 4-player setup of the game Root. The basic synopsis of Root is that you are 4 different factions vying for control of different areas within the same woodland. Put it simply, the first person to 30 points is the winner of the game. The thing that's really unique about this game is that each of the 4 different factions that come in the base game are completely different from one another. And I mean completely different from one another. We're going to get a little bit into each of the factions and how they play. This won't be a complete overview of all the rules exactly to a T. It'll just give you a taste of the 4 different factions, just to kind of give you an idea of how they play. Alright, so the first faction we have here is the Marquis De Cat. So the gist of what this faction is trying to do is they're trying to develop different buildings onto the board. You've got sawmills, workshops, and recruiters, and those do different things for you at the beginning of each of your turns. To put it simply, each of the factions, while it's your turn, you've got the birdsong phase, and then you go into daylight where you can do various actions, and then after you're done with that, you end with the evening phase, which is typically just drawing cards off the deck to replenish your hand a little bit. So you are spending wood to build different buildings, and each time you build a building, it'll give you various victory points. Sawmills will actually generate more wood on the board, so at the beginning of each round you'll get to place wood next to each one of your sawmills, and as you build out the colony further and further with more and more sawmills, it'll generate multiple spots with wood on it. The reason why that's good is you can use your wood, like I said earlier, to purchase different buildings. You've got the cost of each of the buildings listed here, all the way from 0, 1, 2, all the way up to a cost of 4. So that's what the sawmills are good for. You've also got another option to build workshops or recruiters to get into workshops a little bit. We'll get into that a little bit later, but those help you with crafting cards. And then you've got your recruiters down here. The more you develop the board with recruiter tokens, the better you are at recruiting more troops. So as you can see, the Marquis De Cat are pretty well spread out on the board here so far, but the more recruiting stations you've got, the more populated the board becomes with the Marquis De Cat faction. Alright, and like I said, I was going to touch up on crafting. All players have a hand of cards, and like I said, workshops. The more workshops you have out on the board, the better you become at crafting cards out of your hand. How crafting works is that each card has an ability or victory points or different ways of scoring points at the bottom of the card, and a little symbol next to it. That is the crafting symbol that you need control over on the board in order to craft that card. So for example, if I had a workshop on a mouse spot on the board, I would be able to craft this card by discarding it. I would get that token there, also a victory point, and then I would get to discard this card. So that's another way to score points in this game. And the next faction we have is the Eerie Dynasties, or the Bird faction. What makes this faction really unique is the decree at the top of the board here. You've got a recruit action, a move, a battle, or a build. How those are each triggered is actually really unique. You've got cards from your hand. You actually start off with 2 Loyal Viziers up top here, which are wild cards. So any bird talent symbol card in your hand or on front of the board here are wild, and you've got different cards from your hand. How the Eerie Dynasty works is that at the beginning of your turn you can add 1 or 2 cards, or you have to at least add 1 card, but you can add up to 2 cards from your hand to your decree and then resolve that decree in left to right order. So for example here, if I wanted to put this fox symbol in the move spot, I could do that, and then choose not to add a second card, and then I could resolve my decree left to right. So first I would recruit, So out on the board, I would choose a spot where I already have control, and I would add more of my recruits to that spot. Then I would move. I would have to move my troops into a fox clearing because of the fox symbol there, and then I would have to battle. What makes this group so unique is that if I cannot resolve all of those actions in that order, we actually go into turmoil, which is a real bad thing that happens, because if you do go into turmoil, you lose all of your cards up top, and you get negative victory points for all the bird cards you've placed up top. So that's how that works. You are recruiting, moving, battling, and trying to build these roofs on different spots on the board in order to gain victory points throughout the game. Real cool faction, real unique faction with how you resolve those actions at the top. So that is the Eerie. The next faction you can be is the Vagabond, which is just this lonely raccoon that's going around causing trouble out on the board. In your birdsong phase, you can refresh items that, let's say a couple of the items had been spent the previous turn. You can then refresh them in order to use these tiles again for actions on this turn, and then you may slip into another clearing. It's really unique how the Vagabond works because you've only got one on the board out here. The Vagabond can actually go from clearing to clearing or from forest spot to forest spot. The slip action on your board here is actually a free action you can use to slip into a nearby clearing. And then slipping into that clearing, after that we move into the daylight phase. The daylight phase allows you to do different actions similar to the other factions that you can be in this game, but you've got move, explore, aid, quest, which is unique to this faction, strike, which is attacking, and repair or craft. What depicts what actions you're allowed to do are these tiles here. Whichever tiles are on the white side show that they're refreshed and ready to use. Any of them that are flipped over onto this gray side means that they have been exhausted or spent, so then you cannot use those. But whatever symbols you have that are refreshed and ready to use, you can go ahead and flip over to use that as an action, and then look over on the side of the board and it'll show you exactly what you can do with that. From moving to exploring, if you explore a clearing to take an item, you get a victory point for that. You've got different quests. So the Vagabond has these different quests that they can try to complete for victory points here as well, which is unique to the Vagabond faction. And you've got striking, which is removing a piece from the board. You've got these swords here, which is attacking. Let me go over attacking here real quick because I have not done that yet. Attacking works the same for all factions. You've got 2 dice here, and you roll them out. And the higher number goes with the attacker, the lower number goes with the defender. If I have my Vagabond in this clearing here, I could deal 3 damage to the opponent, and the opponent would deal 1 damage to me. So the 3 damage would take out this opponent here. You only can take out a maximum number of characters equal to the number of characters you have in that zone. So because there's only 1 Vagabond, I could take out a maximum of 1 of their characters, but it was enough to kill them, which makes me happy and successful. And then because they dealt the damage to the Vagabond actually does not die like other factions would. What happens instead, looking back here to the Vagabond board, is that your items actually get damaged. So this sword, for example, would go into the damaged zone. Or if they dealt more than 1 damage, more than 1 item would go to the damage zone. The only way to repair those items is by exhausting a hammer to repair those items. So it really slows down the Vagabond player by taking damage in that way. And the last faction we have here is the Woodland Alliance. Definitely the most complicated faction out of the 4. Woodland Alliance is trying to do is spread their sympathy across the land. There is a unique mechanism in order to do that with the Woodland Alliance. You have to add cards from your hand to your supporter stack. On your turn, you're trying to add as many cards as possible to your supporter stack because you cannot use cards directly from your hand unless you're crafting the cards. So you can't use them in any other various ways like other factions can. You first have to add them to your supporter stack. After they're added to the supporter stack, you're then allowed to use them for various actions. In the birdsong phase, for example, spreading sympathy, I can spend any number of supporters listed on the sympathy track. So if I look at this track here, you've got 1, 2 sympathy, and the 3 sympathy spot on the track here. I have to spend that many cards in order to spread a sympathy token from the track there. So for example, if I would have to, in this first 3 tokens here, you have to spend 1 card from your hand in order to spread sympathy, and it has to match the clearing that you were in. So if I were to discard this mouse card, I could spread my sympathy to a mouse clearing out on the board. So I'll spread that out there. That'll give me a victory point. Sympathy allows you to do different things in the future. You're eventually allowed to get officers. You can add officers both to the officer spot on your board and other characters to the board as well. And as you add officers to your board, it allows you to do different military operations eventually there in the future. So there you have it. That's Root in a nutshell. You've got the 4 different factions, all playing completely differently, as you can kind of see from my quick overview. There is one other way to win the game, which I want to go over real quick here. There are dominance cards in the game. If you play a dominance card from your hand, you actually take your victory point marker off the victory point track, and you've got a new win condition. For example, if you dominate 3 different fox clearings, at the start of your next turn, you win the game. Same with this, but with bunny clearings. So that gives some variability to some win conditions for the game. If you feel like you're falling behind on the victory point track and everybody else is pulling ahead, you could maybe whip out one of these cards here to try to sneak in for a victory that's unexpected. All right, so let's get to the table, and here are thoughts on this game.
Excellent. So like we said, this game is Root. It is relatively new. We've played it all the way through maybe twice. Yeah, we started a bunch of games. We've gotten frustrated a bunch of times, but we did get through it a few times, so we'd have some bases of knowledge to share with you guys. Corey, what do you think about this game?
I don't know for the rest of you guys or not, but this is one of my first asymmetrical games I've ever played. So I think that added a lot to the complexity in the learning behind it. Like Brian said, we've played the game now through only a couple times completely, but we have sat down to play it multiple times and had to really power through it the best that we could to try to learn it the best we could. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot this game has to offer, I think. The asymmetrical nature of it is, like I said, new, so it's new and exciting, you know, for that reason alone. But yeah, we can just kind of dive into it and talk more about it.
And this is one of the few games out there that has such a detailed, unique gameplay where they're playing their own games together. John, how do you feel about that?
It definitely was one of my pros as well, kind of as a con, because the pro is you've got these 4 factions that are completely different, so they all have a unique feeling. They're all pretty enjoyable from what I can tell. I mean, I was the Marquis De Cat, and I was this, you know, Woodland Empire that was looking to strengthen its hold on the forest, so that was kind of cool. But I also liked the Vagabond that was running around, you know, doing his own thing, you know, making money, getting items, and then betraying or like killing people for coins. So that seemed cool to me too. Then you have the flip coin of that, like for a new player, it's hard to understand what your opponents are doing and how you want to counter that, because you know your rules and your turn play is completely different than what your opponents are doing. So it's slowly figuring those pieces out. And then I think after that, the game would come together more for me. So
the key phrase is slowly.
Yeah, there are some definite complications and like rules that need, I think, clarification.
Yes,
it's got 2 different rule books. It's got a rule book and then an explanation rule book to the rule book itself. So there's a lot to it.
And there's still, I feel, things missing from these rules that I think they could clarify in future. FAQs.
It was deep, muddy waters of a rule book for sure to trudge through.
Well, let's stay positive right now. We'll get into that stuff. So, Kaylor, what are some of your positives on this game?
Well, I kind of felt the same way. You know, these 4 different factions, 4 different play styles that you're going through in this game is a lot of fun. But of course, until you've kind of trudged through it a couple times, or at least played with some friends, at least a couple turns to get a feel for how each one, you know, you can find that, you know, you're doing your thing and you're losing miserably because you don't know how the other 4 play styles are for. So you got to really determine, you know, how you want to play and contradict what they're trying to play to try to win this game.
There's definitely a lot to unpack in this game, in a good way, generally speaking. And when it comes to the weight, when we get to talking about all that, there's going to be a consensus on all that stuff. But there is so much in this game that you get to unpack, but you also have to unpack. So go in a little bit more detail on that.
There are many paths to victory above and beyond just your faction. You've got dominance cards you can just surprise people with and throw it on the table and say, this is my new win condition. You take your victory point tile off the board, and now you've got a different win condition that's not just points, not just victory points like the rest of the factions are going after. You've got, you know, different cards you can craft. I mean, really, there's a lot to it other than just the faction itself.
Yeah, and I think a special pro for me, we don't talk about this a lot in games, the artwork is really fun.
Oh yeah.
Like the little cartoon characters of each, and on the cards, just it's a fun, stylistic game, kind of like the Robin Hood cartoon, where it's just it's fun to see and to kind of play through. It's really nice.
Can be deceiving for the depth and the complexity of the game.
Yes.
Yeah, it's got whimsical artwork.
Looks like it's a cartoon. It's deep.
Yeah.
Cons, Kaylor, what are some cons of this game?
I mean, basically the complexity is the biggest con I have. With the different factions, knowing what everybody's doing, trying to, you know, formulate a proper plan for attack.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest con for me too, is that it took 5 or 6 sit-downs just to try to wrap our heads around it. I mean, that's kind of a big turnoff to me. I like to unwrap the box, get it open, take the rule book out, and be able to sit down and play through a game in one sitting and understand the game in one sitting. And so I guess that was the biggest turnoff for me, is that it took multiple times. And you need a patient group or a patient crew of people to sit through it that many times. I mean, can you imagine if, I mean, you got a group of guys that are new to gaming, or maybe some other friends that aren't used. It's just like, no, we're not going to come back and try it again. You just give up right away.
They play it once, don't know what's going on.
So that's my biggest con.
And one unique aspect of this game is they have 2-turn playthroughs for everybody. So it's a script telling you what you do on your turn. It's got diagrams, so it really helps orchestrate your first couple of turns. But the problem with that is it doesn't say why you're doing what you're doing. So we've talked about the depth a lot. Anybody think it's anything other than really high?
It's very high.
I think it's the most weight out of any game we've played.
Yeah, it's one of the highest games I've ever played, honestly.
It's just, you need patience, you need a lot of people working together just to learn how to play this game. Now that being said, replayability with it, Kaylor, what's the replayability in your mind?
I mean, I feel like it's high, especially once you get past those, you know, 3 or 4 times playing it, you really get a feel for all 4 factions, and then, yeah, it definitely has a lot of play, because you can play, you know, completely different games for the faction you pick.
Yeah, and Corey, you probably played it the most.
Yeah. Well, not only that, so the replayability is definitely real high with the different factions. You can try a new faction out, even with doing the same faction after each and every game. There's still a lot to go, you know, and learn and explore with that same faction. Not only that, it depends on the people you're playing with, or the group of people you play with too. That could add a lot of variability to the game all in itself. How they play will differ the game completely.
Yeah, a more passive person playing the like militaristic factions, and
or focusing on crafting more than their whatever. You know, there's that changes a lot with just the players itself too. So yeah, very high replayability.
And we've talked about the theme. John, you said that's one of the things you really like. We all agree it's incredibly high theme also.
Absolutely.
It's cool.
That if you didn't have these characters or these specific storylines, they even give backstory on the factions, which is, it's really cool. It's like you're playing a story. So the theme also off the charts is really high. It's a fun experience once you understand what you're experiencing.
Absolutely.
Luck and skill, John, what do you think? Luck versus skill?
Definitely a lot of skill to this game. There's a little bit of luck when you're rolling your dice for your battles, but other than that, it's mostly a skill base, determining where you're building your buildings, what zones you're trying to capture. So definitely a lot of skill to this one.
To go off of that, I would say positioning is huge in this game. Area control is very high. You need to be board awareness and other player awareness. It's very tactical when it comes to that, which I'm not good at all. I don't foresee myself winning this game very often.
I'm okay with that.
So you like tactical games, but you're not very tactical.
I like more strategic games than tactical, and this one seems like it has a lot of tactical. I'm not really the best at area control and positioning either. I can't really foresee certain things like that, so that made it a little bit difficult. But the theme is definitely really cool.
Yeah,
kind of plays into that.
Yeah.
It felt like a forest that has been developed over years and years, like hundreds of years of the factions living there, and
you're
really,
like coming in and playing the story.
Yeah, you're playing the story.
Yeah.
So that was really cool.
So let's go on to teachability. Corey is the one that was kind of sort of starting the teaching on it.
Oh man, forget about it.
Yeah.
No, for me it was near impossible. Like we mentioned earlier, you start to lose a little bit of interest. You have to have a group who's real focused on and determined on learning the game and sticking with it. Not only through one night, but multiple nights of trying to learn how to play it. You need to be real headstrong with this one.
Yeah, it's tough. I know the first time we were running through it, it took us maybe 2 hours. And we only got through a few turns before we just decided we learned enough.
That's enough, yeah.
Right.
We'll try it again in a few days. But it's been worth it for the most part.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's wrap this up with our overall score, 1 to 10. John, what would you give it?
I'm sitting around in a 6-7 range. I probably haven't played it enough to know totally how I feel about it. That complexity kind of sets me back a little bit. But so far what I've liked, I mean, it's been good. So I think it's definitely worth diving into more and
Seeing where it
figuring
goes.
out the nuances and whatnot of the game.
Corey, what's your rating?
Same spot, 6.5 out of 10. For now, I feel like the rating will climb with more consecutive plays and kind of wrapping our heads around it a little bit more and understanding it more. I feel like once you have a real solid group who has a solid understanding of all 4 factions and know exactly what's going on, it's going to take probably 10 years at this point to get a grasp on that. But once we get there, I feel like it'll be fun. Having said that, though, the rating, I think my rating might climb for that reason once we know more about all the factions. But having said that, the rating could also drop for that same reason if we try to introduce it to other people or playing with my wife or brothers or other people who haven't played it as often. The rating, it might not hit the table as often.
Yeah. Taylor, what are your...
I give it a 5.5 on this one. I mean, if I'd have rated the first time we played it, I would have given it more like of a 4, just because of the complexity. But I agree with these guys. It definitely could adjust after playing it a few more times and understanding it better.
Yeah, and I would go even lower. I would rate this like a 3. Because it's really tough. And I just won the last time we played. We played right before we filmed here. It's tough.
Holy cow.
And I couldn't envision my group bringing it home to my family, them ever being able to play this. Because one time trying to play it, it would just turn them off. And that would be frustrating for me. I love playing it with us, and I feel like Corey, like you said, the rhythm of when we understand it more and understand all of it, it could definitely rise to like a 7 or 8. But right now, it's so tough. I look forward to playing it only because I want to not win the game against these guys, but beat the game against itself in learning how to play it. Yeah. So I would rather have my mental faculties used in other games, going much deeper in strategy. But, I mean, we've played it a few times, and it is getting better.
Yeah, I can definitely see where your 3 is coming from. Having said that, too, if you find yourself to be a sort of a gamer or a collector of board games who has more of a minimal collection, and you're not to the 100+ games that are back here, and you're just focusing on having maybe 10 or 15 different games where you can spend more time on a game and be more involved in a game more often, this one might be more for you, too. But my personality is I like to have a large collection of games. I like to vary it. I like each game night to be a little bit different. And then this one, I just can't see it. It's going to be tough. I mean, you're going to have to make it one of your mainstay games that you play each time just to refresh your memory or, get better.
And it is great to have in a library. The way it looks, the fact it is so incredibly unique. I will give you that. And you're the one that builds the library, so love having it as a part of it. So what do you think about buying it? Try before you buy. What do you think, Corey?
Man, at least a try before you buy. If not, meh. I don't know
a few times before you buy.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's just me, just being me, or just us being us and the style of games that we tend to like. This is completely different than anything we've ever really played. You can't really say it's an American style or a Euro style, or really pin it down to its mechanisms, because really it's completely different.
Yeah, unique.
It's very unique, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing for some people.
I would say not only try before you buy, try before you convince somebody else to buy. Watch videos and playthroughs on this. Just as much experience as you can get with this game. It will help you decide if you want to invest in it, if you like it or like that idea. I anticipate more games will start coming out that are this asymmetrical, that are unique like this.
Yeah, there are a few. But.
Yeah. So I think that this is a really different avenue to be taking games down, where it's not formulaic. But we'll see, and we'll definitely be looking out for it. And if more come down that we like, we're definitely going to try it and do some reviews for you all. That'll wrap up this episode of Talking Cardboard. As always, you can follow us on Twitter. We have tweeted about this game plenty. I think we've kept them all censored as far as I can remember. Yeah. Yep, PG language, but it's a fun experience. It really is a unique experience. So we'll leave it up to you. Figure out if you like it or not.
Leave some comments below too. We'd love to hear what other people have to say about it. Prove us wrong with this complexity level.
Yeah, or just other thoughts, because this is a relatively new game, so the more the community can explain it through, it works better for everybody. So for Talking Cardboard, I'm Brian, and have fun gaming.